Zanele Dlamini never imagined her life would change so drastically when she stepped into Mkhuseli Nkobo's grand office that rainy Tuesday morning. The city of Johannesburg buzzed outside, but inside the imposing high-rise, Zanele felt completely isolated from the world she knew. She was just a poor errand girl, barely making ends meet in the bustling streets, her soaked shoes squelching with each step on the polished marble floor. Mkhuseli's office was as intimidating as the man himself, high ceilings, dark wood, and a panoramic view of the city obscured by the rain. Everything about the space screamed power and wealth. The man seated behind the large desk exuded the same, his sharp features and penetrating gaze making Zanele feel small and vulnerable. "Miss Dlamini," Mkhuseli began, his voice as smooth and controlled as the rest of him, "I have a proposition for you." Zanele's heart pounded in her chest. She had seen Mkhuseli on TV and read about him in magazines. He was a man who commanded respect and attention. But what could someone like him want with her? "A proposition?" she echoed, her voice small but curious. "Yes," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly as if calculating something beyond her understanding. "I need you to pose as my wife." Zanele blinked, certain she had misheard. "Your wife? But why me?" Mkhuseli leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her. "Because you are an unknown. No one would suspect you of being part of my world, and that is precisely what I need." He laid out the situation with clinical precision. A billion-dollar merger was on the line, but the conservative board members of the opposing company insisted on dealing with a family man, someone trustworthy. Mkhuseli needed a wife, and she was perfect for the role, completely off the radar. "This is strictly business," he stated, his tone brooking no argument. "No love, no romance. You will be compensated handsomely, and after a year, we'll part ways as if this never happened." Zanele's mind raced. The offer was life-changing, but the idea of living a lie, of deceiving so many people, made her stomach churn. Yet the thought of the money, the kind that could lift her out of poverty and change her future, was impossible to ignore. She glanced around the opulent office, her reflection distorted in the glass windows by the rain. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, but there was only one answer she could give. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll do it." Zanele's transformation was swift and overwhelming. She was whisked away from her one-room apartment to a life of luxury she had never imagined. Designers and stylists worked tirelessly to mold her into the perfect billionaire's wife. Her days were filled with fittings, etiquette lessons, and rehearsals on how to behave in high society. The woman she saw in the mirror was a stranger, polished and poised, yet deeply uncomfortable in her new skin. Mkhuseli remained distant, treating her as a business transaction rather than a person. They rarely spoke outside of public appearances, and when they did, it was strictly about the role she was to play. "Remember, no personal questions," he would remind her, his tone as cold as the marble floors of his mansion. "This is business, nothing more." Despite the rules, Zanele couldn't help but notice the man behind the mask. She saw the tension in his jaw when he thought no one was looking, the way his eyes would cloud with something resembling pain when he spoke about his past, though he never divulged details. There was a deep, unspoken sadness in him that both intrigued and unnerved her. As the days turned into weeks, Zanele struggled with her growing internal conflict. She was losing herself in this new life, becoming someone she didn't recognize. Every night, alone in her luxurious bedroom, she would lie awake, wondering if she had made the right choice. And yet, there were moments, fleeting, subtle moments where she felt a connection with Mkhuseli, a shared glance, a softening in his expression, a brief touch of his hand. She knew she shouldn't care, that this was all a facade, but those moments made it harder to keep her emotions in check. The merger was proceeding smoothly, and Zanele had become adept at playing her role. The board members were charmed by the loving couple, and the deal seemed all but sealed. But just as everything was falling into place, a complication arose that threw Zanele's carefully controlled world into chaos. One evening, at a high-profile charity event, Zanele noticed a woman watching them from across the room. She was strikingly beautiful, with an air of familiarity about her that Zanele couldn't place. The moment Mkhuseli saw her, his entire demeanor shifted, his usual cool confidence replaced by a tension that set Zanele on edge. Later that night, as they prepared to retire to their separate rooms, Zanele couldn't suppress her curiosity. "Who was that woman at the event?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual despite the turmoil in her chest. Mkhuseli's response was curt, almost dismissive. "Just someone from the past. It's nothing you need to worry about." But the tightness in his voice, the way he avoided her gaze, told Zanele that this woman was far from insignificant. A few days later, her suspicions were confirmed when she received a mysterious letter, delivered to her in the dead of night. It was from the woman. Her name was Thandiwe, and she claimed to be Mkhuseli's ex-fiancé. The letter was filled with accusations, painting Mkhuseli as a cold, calculating man who had destroyed her life. Thandiwe warned Zanele that she was just another pawn in his game, a tool he was using to achieve his ends. She urged Zanele to be careful, to not trust him with her heart. Zanele's hands shook as she read the letter, her mind reeling. Was Thandiwe telling the truth? Had she been naive to think there was more to Mkhuseli than what he showed the world? Doubts began to creep in, and for the first time, Zanele found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the man she was pretending to be married to. Determined to uncover the truth, Zanele began to dig into Mkhuseli's past. She spoke to people who had known him and pieced together stories and rumors until she had a clearer picture of the man she was living with. Thandiwe's accusations were not without merit. Mkhuseli had indeed used people to climb the corporate ladder, manipulating them to secure his place at the top. But the most shocking revelation was the depth of the betrayal that had shaped him. Through her inquiries, Zanele learned that Mkhuseli had once been deeply in love with Thandiwe. Their relationship had been passionate and intense, but it ended in tragedy when Thandiwe betrayed him for his business rival. The betrayal had left Mkhuseli shattered, not just emotionally, but financially as well. It was the event that turned him into the cold, calculating man he had become. Zanele confronted Mkhuseli with what she had discovered. She demanded to know the truth about Thandiwe, about why he had chosen her for this charade, and whether there was any part of him that wasn't driven by cold calculation. Mkhuseli's facade finally cracked. He admitted everything, revealing the pain and betrayal that had shaped him into the man he is today. He confessed that he had chosen Zanele because she reminded him of who he used to be, innocent, untainted by the world of wealth and power. But more than that, despite all his efforts to keep his heart closed, he had fallen in love with her. "I didn't want this," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I didn't want to feel anything again, but you've made me remember what it's like to care." Zanele was torn. She had been hurt by his deception, but she couldn't deny her own feelings for him. She had seen the vulnerability in him, the brokenness that mirrored her own fears of being used and discarded. But could she really trust him after everything that had happened? The merger was finalized, and the charade was officially over. Zanele was free to leave, to return to her old life. but the decision weighed heavily on her. She had come to care for Mkhuseli, but the trust between them had been shattered. In the days following the merger's completion, Mkhuseli became more withdrawn, as if preparing himself for the inevitable separation. The moments of connection they had shared now felt like ghosts, haunting the empty spaces between them. Zanele found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions. Could she forgive him, or was it too late? In the end, Zanele chose to walk away. She returned to her modest life, leaving behind the wealth, the lies, and the man who had both deceived and captivated her. It was a painful decision, but one she knew was necessary. She needed to rediscover herself, to find her own path without the shadow of Mkhuseli's world looming over her. Mkhuseli was left to reflect on his actions. He had lost the only woman who had ever made him feel again, and he knew it was his own fault. The pain of losing Zanele was a wake-up call, forcing him to confront the man he had become. He vowed to change, to become a man worthy of love, but he knew it would be a long, difficult journey. Years later, Zanele heard about Mkhuseli again. He had indeed changed, becoming a philanthropist and giving back to the community. The once ruthless businessman had found a new purpose, one that didn't involve stepping on others to reach the top. Zanele smiled as she read the news, knowing that in some small way she had helped him find his way. But for her, the greatest lesson was that she didn't need a billionaire's wealth to be happy. She had found her own path, one built on truth, love, and the knowledge that she was worth more than any deceptive deal. And as she walked through the familiar streets of Johannesburg, she felt a sense of peace. She had been through a whirlwind of emotions, deceit, and suspense, but in the end she had found herself again, and that, she realized, was worth more than all the money in the world.